Okay, great. Let's make a start. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Lim from PowerON. Thank you for your time this afternoon. I'm going to be joined today by Microsoft MVP and my colleague Steve Beaumont. We're excited to present to you this afternoon the latest cloud offering from PowerON called Pulse, which is a device management and security platform built on System Center configuration and Microsoft Azure. We're going to be taking you through a high-level overview of the background, the concept of Pulse, and equally Steve is going to take you through a demonstration as well. So what we're going to cover today is some of the shifts that we're seeing both in the enterprise and also specifically with Windows 10. We're going to be taking you through some of the infrastructure approaches that some of our clients have towards that and ourselves as a consulting partner help them with. We're going to talk about the Pulse concept, as I mentioned, and Steve's going to take us through a demonstration and look to see at the end of the presentation some of the subscription options that are available for you and address any questions that you have throughout the presentation. So let's make a start. The first shift that we're going to talk about effectively is cloud in the enterprise. A lot of clients that we speak and work with have a cloud-first strategy, and the change in terms of cloud adoption is ever prevalent, with 83% of enterprise workloads looking to be in the cloud by 2020. So this shift and exponential rise of enterprise shifting workloads covers, across infrastructure, platform, and software as a service solutions. But really, it's an undeniable shift that we're seeing with organizations taking advantage of these cloud services to reduce business risk, stay more secure, and improve IT service delivery to their organizations, just as a couple of key takeaways. The second shift we're seeing really we start to hone down on what Microsoft are doing in the enterprise. We've seen them release many cloud software as a service subscription platforms like Office 365, Dynamics, and SharePoint, to name a few. But when we look at Windows and Windows 10 specifically, they're introducing this concept of Windows as a service. And effectively, it's a biannual update of the Windows 10 image, a feature release, codenamed 1709, for example, then 1803. And what this is really to create an increase in the cadence of how Windows 10 updates are released. Feature updates are released in that cycle, with these releases being supported for 18 months. Equally, Office 365 Pro Plus has a similar release cadence, and this shift really changes the way that we design and look at desktop migrations with Windows 10, and equally look at changing them into more of a business as usual and repeatable process, which I'll talk about later. The third shift that we're seeing, which is relatively unknown at this point in time, but no doubt will become more prevalent, is the shift that Microsoft are taking, which they're terming the SaaSification of Configuration Manager. So really, what they're looking at doing is having an increased cadence of the Configuration Manager, so the underpinning systems management tool that sits in the System Center platform, to align with the Windows 10 increase in cadence as well. So what this means for organizations with on-premise configuration manager capabilities that typically support their desktop operating procedures and migrations is really a twofold increase in the maintenance and requirement for IT to support and that watering and feeding of those infrastructures across both desktop operating system and server management infrastructure alongside to keep those organizations up to date with the latest feature releases and security patches with Windows 10 as well. So with those three shifts, what we're seeing and how that transpires with Windows 10 is really looking at more of a business as usual lifecycle and approach that I mentioned before. So many organizations that are migrating or have migrated to previous operating systems before will have some form of workload structure like you see on the left-hand side here, where they break down, what are the core IT components and also user and migration components of their desktop estate, and really look to put those elements into a lifecycle process, an approach by which they would go about planning, designing, building, and deploying Windows 10, for example, across their estate. Now, as I mentioned before, with that increased biannual cadence of Windows 10 and those feature releases, what organizations can be mindful of around that is that this is now going to be an ongoing process. So whilst there might be a larger, longer process to get onto Windows 10, ideally what we're seeing and what our clients are asking us to help them with is how they can create repeatable processes that help then adopt the latest feature releases of Windows 10 in an iterative cycle and look to make that more of a business as usual ongoing process like I mentioned before. So let's now take a look at what some of the infrastructure approaches from Microsoft look like in terms of how we can support this change. First of all, a very familiar option that most of you will be either running on premise now in your infrastructures is Configuration Manager. If you've not upgraded to the latest current branch, that's a requirement for Windows 10 and Active Directory. So very much an on-premise architecture. Configuration Manager has been around for 25 years, so that model pretty much has stayed the same throughout that life cycle. The second approach that Microsoft, is starting to introduce is this cloud approach. So really looking at Azure Active Directory, Microsoft Intune, and Windows Update for Business. So very much cloud software as a service platforms that allow you to manage Windows 10 as well. So with these two approaches, effectively Microsoft has provided very much enterprise class approaches to the industry such that organizations can still look to migrate to Windows 10. So we saw effectively a gap in the market. A lot of the cloud solutions from Microsoft may have requirements that organizations need that aren't necessarily met by them. And for example, for PSN compliance, the ability to evidence that you've migrated and re-imaged that machine, for example, or really granular security policies that might be applied, or task sequences that are required for any business critical applications that they have. But a lot of the organizations that we worked with really wanted the flexibility and risk profile reduction that cloud services provide them, but really with the power of the on-premise capabilities of Configuration Manager. So this is where this concept that we came up with at PowerON around a cloud platform that provided that managed system center configuration environment for customers, leveraging Azure Active Directory and providing the best of both on-premise and cloud delivery models for our customers. So giving them the platform as a service, but all the power for them to manage that and configure as required like they normally would, but the ability to then reach their devices from the internet and really break down some of the requirements for on-premise infrastructure as well. So this is the concept that we'll be talking about today and what we'll be focusing on with our product called Pulse. So if we take a look at traditional on-premise infrastructures on the left-hand side that you'll see here, here are all the components that are typically required for an organization to maintain that infrastructure. And equally, as I mentioned, with Configuration Manager adopting its own iterative cycle, the cycle for updating and change management and release management of that infrastructure is also going to increase. And what we spoke about with our clients was really looking about what outcomes do you want to achieve from Configuration Manager. And really what they wanted was that cloud-enabled capability. They wanted simplified administration. They really wanted a platform that allowed them to adopt upgraded versions of Windows, and so the Windows as a service approach, so that servicing platform, and ideally reducing cost and complexity within the organization. So this founded for us at PowerON the concept of Pulse to provide a modern platform integrated with a lot of the Microsoft technologies, with Intune, with Autopilot, helping them to plan their desktop migrations using things like Windows Analytics integration, and equally that to be used as an ongoing service for them to plan to upgrade to future releases as well. So that was really the modern concept of the platform. And equally, one of the most important pieces was really the security side. So how do we look at simplifying patching for organizations on Windows 10? How do we look at giving them the ability for that enterprise granularity of policy configuration and security updates that Configuration Manager has, but delivered from the cloud? How do we help organizations integrate with some of the advanced Microsoft SaaS products around Windows Defender, advanced threat protection, those kind of things that organizations can get with some of the higher SKUs in the Microsoft E5 stack. And equally, what benefits can we add on top of Configuration Manager? So what we looked at was the UK National Cybersecurity Centre guidelines, the policies that they'd provided out there when we created them as templates on top of the platform to really help our customers use them as a starting point for security templates that they may wish to configure themselves. Flexibility was a really key part and component of what our customers were requesting as well. So what they said to us was, our licensing is based on a subscription service, but with Configuration Manager, it's actually an on-premise technology that we need to maintain. So how can you help us take away, that on-premise piece, but still keep it as a subscription platform for us, keep that watered and fed, but really enable us to simplify and be flexible in terms of how we manage our organization environments. And so what that transpired was really looking at internet-based operating system deployments, re-imaging, software distribution remotely, which is a big key function, and really also that simplified administration ability. So Configuration Manager is a fairly complex enterprise tool. Administration from the console is still a massive requirement for a lot of organizations. So we looked to say that absolutely we need to provide that, but equally, how do we provide a new interface, for example, service desk analysts to be able to get the information that they need when doing triage calls or taking first line calls that resides in Configuration Manager as well. And secondly, in the flexibility side, we really looked at how do we help organizations have what we call mixed estate management. So supporting from Windows 7 upwards, that really helps them have a platform to manage their infrastructure, but then a platform that they can use to migrate to Windows 10 as well. So that was a key component as part of the concept. And that management piece is really, really key as part of the concept here. Customers didn't want to have the pain of water and feeding and upgrading Configuration Manager. They already have that requirement as part of Windows as a service themselves with Windows 10. So really they looked to us with this concept to take away that burden and look at providing that as an evergreen platform themselves as well. How does this look in terms of capabilities of Pulse? So this is where the concept came of how do we provide Configuration Manager as an online platform for our customers. And really we looked at all of the elements that I spoke about before, the Windows Analytics integration, leveraging Microsoft Azure Active Directory, so the basics of the free version of that, integrating with Windows Intune, integrating with Windows Defender. We've got bandwidth optimization technologies in there because, as you can imagine, we're taking away the management servers on premise, we're taking away the distribution points on premise. So we've got technology that allows us to still deploy operating systems to those devices without any of that local on-premise infrastructure. We've built the platform on Microsoft Azure, so we've got that level of service availability and security. And equally, we've got a brand new web portal interface for Configuration Manager for service desk staff that I mentioned before. So this is what we call the daily operator interface, but equally, we've enabled the ability for advanced operators to still have access to the console to do all the typical configuration and elements that they need to do as an advanced operator for Configuration Manager. What this allows us to do with Pulse is, as it's a pre-provisioned cloud platform, essentially speed to value is excellent. It's already there, it's already built. It's a simple case of onboarding clients to the platform, similar to how you would do with Exchange Online, where you just create a new mailbox. There's no design architecture required as part of that, as it's a pre-provisioned platform as well. So hopefully that's given you a really quick overview of what Pulse is, the concept behind it. And what I'll do now is I'll hand over to Steve to take you through a high-level demonstration of Pulse, and then I'll come back at the end to take you through some of the subscription models and any questions that you may have as well. All right, thank you.
Right, I'm going to take you through some of the different features and areas around Pulse DMS, concentrating mainly around things like the security and updates, how we can better secure and protect with Pulse using some of our built-in processes, some of the services that we deliver around it. We'll also look at how Windows 10, how we can deploy and plan faster, use the information that we've got flowing into here to make them decisions around which areas of your organization to start targeting for the upgrades, not just on something like 7 or 8 to Windows 10, but also that ongoing Windows as a Service lifecycle management. So I'm currently landed on the web console for Pulse DMS. So this is where we usually do our daily operational tasks. We can see various bits within our estate, such as the machines that we have, the different OS versions that we're on, and including drilling in and getting that deeper information from mainly that help desk style view where we want to do that quick troubleshooting, help a user out that's got an issue so we can find out information around the device that they're on, what software they have installed, whether they're missing certain software updates, etc. So this web console is designed to be very quick, intuitive to use, have that aspect of the different devices that we could search, connect to remotely, as well as being able to build up our software library by uploading the software from here and setting the various parameters around how it's actually installed and what we're actually targeting these applications at for deployment. But we do still have this much richer admin console for them granular tasks that we need to get in and actually uniquely customize things like the applications, the task sequence, or the security settings for our environment. So before I dive into the various different areas on this, I do just want to cover some of these various things around the software updates. So we have access to the wide range of different software updates that Microsoft provide, both on the OS platform and across on things like the Office applications, the various different components from Microsoft. So anything that's within the Microsoft catalog services for things like Windows updates, we will have and displayed in here so you can actually go and look at it. Now, that would be great if we do want to just browse through, find the various updates on an ad hoc basis, but that doesn't make for efficient usage of our time when it comes to actually looking after our estate. So we've been doing this for a while. So we leverage automatic deployment update rules to be able to make sure that we come up with a programmatic approach to actually doing the update deployment. So if we take, for example, just the Windows Desktop OS, what we find is that we will generate via the Pulse DMS service an actual run of the software updates every month based on what has been released. Now that makes it really easy from an end user point of perspective, or sorry, an IT admin perspective, because every tenant will be populated with these phases for software update patches. So we generally tend to say that with our methodology, we'll look at deploying out to the phase one, or what we call a canary collection, so a collection of non-critical devices, ones that are generally close to you to do that initial test run, and patches will deploy to them 7 days after release. And then this rolls across into phase two. So we say that basically 14 days after release. So if there's nothing that's gone wrong on that phase one, we know that things haven't broken, we're not getting blue screens of death, the internet's not screaming on things like Twitter and Reddit that these patches have broken anything, then let it roll over automatically to phase two, which could be a much wider segment of your estate. Bring in some of your critical devices, even on the server side if you're looking at things that are in a high availability mix. Then that will hit 14 days after, and then we say basically 21 days after is your phase three, which should be basically the entire estate of your environment. So then by the end of another 7 days off that 21, we then cycle back around to phase one for the next month's worth of patches. So you generally take it on the aspect of you treating it by exception only. Only if something goes wrong do you need to halt the process, but on a normal daily operational basis, it should just be rolling out the patches in a phased state manner. Now, because that we do have the real granularity of Configuration Manager behind the scene, and these collections can be built up on any aspect of information that we gather, you could say, well, actually, we know that in the past we've had problems with a specific model of vendor, say Dell or HP, and it must be this specific Inspiron model with this battery and only 4 gig of RAM. You can model out how them queries are behind your collections to make sure that you're either hitting them first or leaving them till a much later point without having to worry about manually finding them computer names and putting them in the collections themselves. So That's on the software update side. Like I say, we have the granularity to be able to go in and individually choose, pick and mix them, set up your own automatic deployment rules to be able to say, well, fine, we want to drag down these very specific SQL patches, for example, choose when and where we're going to deploy them, or just let the phased collection approach within DMS handle your patching for you. So you look at it more as a exception basis and reporting on success or failure of it. Now, the whole focus, especially as we get to Windows 10, and this is why the Ports DMS service supports this really nicely, is around securing the environment. So not just making sure that we're patched, but how do we leverage the new features within Windows 10 to be able to very granularly control what we can and can't do from in terms of an attacker perspective within our environment. So we gain all the lovely capabilities around things like building up our application guard, application control policies, being able to configure the new, or what was Emmet, but is now a feature within Windows 10. How we want to control our anti-malware policies. So we can granularly control whether we want to have real-time protection enabled, excluding certain processes, certain files if the SQL servers, and be able to actually control even things down to how we onboard into some of the paid for services from Microsoft, such as ATP or Advanced Threat Protection. Now, I mentioned Advanced Threat Protection, like I say, that is part of the E5 SKU for Windows. However, being able to very quickly onboard into this service by simply using DMS to say, well, actually, here is the file that we downloaded from ATP, deploy it out to all of our different devices. So you can see here, I have a deployment that is going across to all of my Windows 10 devices. All it is it's a zip file that I actually uploaded from the configuration file that we downloaded from within the ATA site. So what is it we're going to actually upload, etc. And then it handles the rest of it itself. So it will configure your devices. As you can see here, here's one of my test devices. You can see I was running some test recognition patterns on it. And then ATP will very, very granularly process what is going on within your estate, what the different processes are doing, where they're going out and talking to, so the actual process chains, real intricate security measures that can be applied around it, but easily enabled by the Ports DMS service. On a similar vein, we also have something called Windows Analytics that is available to everyone that's using a Windows operating system. Now, this is a free service from Microsoft. So if I bring this up, here we go. So I'm actually landed in the Operations Management Suite console because this is where it lives up in the cloud. Now, this is a case of you register for the free account for it, you get a commercial ID, and then again, using that commercial ID, we can push that down to your devices that are enabled within Ports DMS so that it starts to upload information to the cloud service. Now, this is some of my demo data, so I'll just pull this in, but this is the type of information we get. They've recently just added in Spectre Meltdown information, so you can start to see where you are protected within your environment against them nasty vulnerabilities that were announced within the processor sets. But it's also addressing the issue of not just looking at which machines can I go from 7 and 8 to 10, but also between the different versions. So if I already have a Windows 10 estate, which some of these devices are, and I want to go to the latest build of Windows 10, let me start to use this to actually look at how I'm going to deploy my estate, how I'm going to rapidly adopt the new versions without having to sit and manually process everything that's within my estate, such as my applications, their compatibility, which ones do I need to replace, which ones are going to block me upgrades. You can see here that now this information is flowing in. There's a lot of learning that Microsoft have. They see this across the entire global set of information that's been uploaded to the analytics site, and they can push information then back down for you to use as part of your analysis. So I can see how many applications are in my estate, which ones that Microsoft can be aware of, which ones you might need to go and actually have some manual input into it because they're unique to your environment until Microsoft sees them more of. But we also get to see about the issues. So we can see we've got quite a few applications, so 56 in total, that we need to do something with. However, 4 of them already have fixes available. So that means that I don't need to go and search for it myself. Hopefully, if I click on this and drill down, I should be able to actually see some of that information. Hope it displays it in a little bit better format. There we go. So here we go. There are some network monitors, some checkpoint SSLs, and it's giving me some information. Oh, it's as simple, it just needs reinstalling after the upgrade. So in other words, it won't persist through the upgrade. We'd either have to look at removing it beforehand and then reinstall it afterwards, or it will be automatically removed during the upgrade. So we just need to make sure that we do put it back on again. Whereas if we look at some of the other applications, so the attention needed ones, not only do we get the useful metrics around about just how much of an impact is it on my environment. I was hoping that would have tabled it a bit better. Here we go. So how many devices do have it? So which ones are going to be the most important? We might as well go for the ones that are higher counts. So display link software, for example. So 144 installs. There we go. We immediately know that that will be removed during the upgrade. We've got some that are here that fine, it won't remove it, it won't block it, but it's not going to work. So they're the ones we go target to make sure that we need to get an update version. Same with that one. So that one will block an upgrade. So if we're not aware of that, now thankfully in this demo set I've only got one that needs to be aware of, and that's actually a Microsoft application. Oh, it's Virtual Server 2005. Well, if anyone's still using that, then I'm not going to bother upgrading them anyway. However, you get the idea. I now know, and because we have this information within Pulse DMS, so I can go and start to look through my reports, build up my queries to say, find me the devices with Virtual Server 2005 R2SP1 on it, and I can immediately exclude them from the initial upgrade cycles, which means I can use the system to really rapidly increase how quickly I get the new versions out in that Windows lifecycle, because I'm not hitting ones that will immediately block and drag my numbers down. I know the ones that are going to be okay. Let's just get on with doing them ones while we assess and address, in this case, 52 applications, which isn't bad out of a data set of specifically 6,000 odd devices. So you can see I've got 6,000 computers, 52 apps that won't work with the latest version of Windows 10, or 56, including the ones with the fixes. But you get the idea. This is immediately allowing me to unblock myself and get on with it. I've got some drivers I'm going to need to go and assess. Again, I'm still seeing which ones that I should be able to get on with, how my upgrade state's going, so I get that continuous feedback into it, as well as the little things like which Office add-ins are going to cause me problems, and what are my highest used internet sites, and which ones might not work on something like IE11 or Edge. So again, I can start to put mitigations in there, use things like enterprise mode to make sure that there's no user experience downgrade as we do start to do that migration. Now, talking about the migration side, we do have the Windows 10 servicing modules. So there's a couple of ways you can get to Windows 10. You can use some task sequences. So this is where we can go and actually have a very granular touch process, either in-place upgrade, maybe we want to wipe and reload it, we want to remove some applications first, handle things like disabling legacy disk encryption products so we can get to use BitLocker, make sure that we do the upgrade in a specific way, or we can use the servicing plans. So servicing plans is as we start to use this Windows as a Service lifecycle and say, okay, I've got my phase 1 Canary users or devices, and then I go through and start to choose which ones they're going to be. I don't have a collection pre-built for this, so I'm going to choose the same as my phase 1 for desktops. Probably don't want to do this in production environment, so you create your own set of collections for it. And this is where we get to say what we're going to do. So we have the two different options. The semi-annual channel targeted is what used to be the current branch, so the very quickest release. So basically, as soon as it comes out, I want to delay for 30 days and then start pushing down to it. Whereas the semi-annual channel is generally made available 4 months after it's been initially released. So then you could do a delay of 4 months plus another 2 months to give you a 6-month delay before it starts to run that one out across your area. But this allows you to start defining out how quickly and which versions you're going to start to push out to the estate. So you do your very first quick tests. If you're not already testing manually within IT around the insider previews, then you say, right, for our really fast users or IT specifically, we want to get out as quickly as possible a new release when it's been done. What does it need to be? Well, we want to target the English side first, so we want to target the London office. Maybe then we want to go and actually target the Hong Kong office, so we get to choose granularly what versions, what language types, what SKUs, so whether we want to use Pro or Enterprise for this, or education. When do we want it to happen? Do we want to make it an available deployment? So do we want users to have the option for the first couple of days to choose when it suits them to start to install it before we start to enforce the installation? So we get that nice touchy feel, how we can control it. And it would even start to appear within the actual software center. So users would see installations and updates and operating systems, and they can choose when they want to actually perform that next step up to the next features before we start to enforce when that's going to actually happen. So we have the servicing plans in place nicely to be able to help us get up to the different versions. You see I've got all my different languages and sets around my 1709s in here at the minute in different versions, and we can choose which ones that we're going to use to step up. So we've got that different ideas. We have, like I mentioned, the different task sequences, so we can choose how we're going to upgrade it if we want to do real granular, or we can actually do the actual servicing models to allow it to run as an update phase when it's most suitable, but on the devices that we know are capable of upgrading, using that Windows Analytics flow from your devices into the service by Microsoft that you can consume and use to accelerate your migration. Now, on top of that, we also have obviously the management of things like Office 365. So not only can we ease the actual installation and deployment, but also the ongoing patching and maintenance of the actual Office 365 from here now. So we don't have to worry about all clients just going randomly off to the internet when they choose to update. We control now the update lifecycle. We know what versions that we're going to want on the machines. Unless, like me, you're testing various different versions, and then you have a lovely pretty pie chart. But we also need to make sure that, again, that overall it's controlled and monitored and managed as we see fit. So you might have saw earlier in my web view that it very easily highlights that a lot of my devices within this demo test environment aren't actually joined to a domain. So I'm using a lot of workgroup machines. They're actually a lot of these Azure AD joined machines. So that new modern management style where we don't have necessarily the granular control that group policy gives us for domain joined devices. But we still, with Imports DMS, can leverage the configuration item settings to control the various different settings. So we put a lot of work into actually going through what NCSC, so the National Cyber Security Centre in the UK, recommend as the best settings or the recommended settings to look at to secure your devices within your environment. So we've broken them down, we brought in the various different things. So password attributes, for example, if I pull that lot up. So we have these in a read-only view setting for yourselves, where you can go through, see whether these are relevant to your environment, and then take a copy of them and actually assign them for deployment out to different devices. So little things like, do we want to limit the account use of blank passwords for local console only? You can see it's got the various different settings for the registry. So we've done a lot of the work that's needed that if you don't have group policy or you haven't gone and created these in group policy into your own settings and policies already, these are now ready and available, and we'll maintain them over time as NCSC make their decisions and their guidance different. And then you can just pull them down, wrap them into your own configuration, enable, disable, remove various ones, add them to a baseline, and basically deploy that out to your estate. So this allows you to, like I mentioned, even if you don't have a domain joined device, if you're not utilizing group policy for it, you can use Ports DMS to granularly control these devices no matter where they are, what domain, whether they're in DMZs, whether they're just internet based, workgroup based, or Azure AD joined, we don't care. As long as they're managed via Ports DMS, then we can actually set them settings for you and control them. And that's alongside all the other bits and pieces that we have within the ConfigMgr backend, controlling things like VPN profiles, pushing out Wi-Fi's for your environment, even as simple as making sure that we upgrade you to the correct version of Windows that you're licensed for, so that you don't have to worry about whether you're doing Pro or Enterprise. It will be the license allocation that you have that upgrades it to the right version. So that was some of the brief tours around some of the security and the update side, how we can utilize some of the stuff that's already in Pulse DMS, sat there ready and waiting for you when you start your journey with it, how we can start to look at Windows 10 using some of the information flows that's very easy to onboard with things like Windows Analytics, to be able to actually make sure that we get the best experience for yourself to rapidly enhance both your deployment plans and your security posture. Now I'm just going to pivot slightly and show you some of the architectural behind the scenes of how this is actually based and how you will leverage it within your environment. Okay, so I just wanted to talk a bit about the architecture, just give you an understanding of how we built Pulse DMS and what's involved with it. So as you would have seen this slide earlier, so this was that whole concept of at present, we see a lot of instances where config manager is contained just to the local intranet, so the local LAN, using the traditional policies, managing via Active Directory, discovering the computers, as long as they are domain joined and on a LAN segment where you can talk to the servers within your environment, you can generally manage stuff. We've seen some encroaches with using Intune and using Azure Active Directory for some of these devices that are hybrid joined, being able to manage mainly for the mobile devices, but there's some creeping scope around managing the Windows 10 devices, where you've got the two very distinct systems. Now, obviously, Microsoft making a very big push into managing what we're now calling this whole hybrid world and with co-management. So being able to integrate a lot more easily the devices, no matter whether they're sat inside your corporate network or whether they are hybrid Azure AD join, giving you that flexibility to manage it with the more modern tool sets. However, when it does come to that fact that you are then looking at tool sets which may have some features that are really good and some of them really future states, not so good at managing your previous state, and you're having to juggle again between the two systems, Pulse DMS kind of ties that together and gives you that bridge between the best of both worlds, meaning you're not sacrificing managing your current estate, how it currently is, or being able to transition to that modern management and that future world. So to get there, we needed to find a better way of making sure that the core infrastructure, the systems that manage these, is sat somewhere else rather than just contained within your environment. So the first thing that we did was we obviously went to the cloud for this. So this is where we designed the ConfigMgr core infrastructure as such to be as flexible and as scalable as possible within a cloud-hosted system, so Microsoft Azure within this. We leverage a lot of the newer Microsoft technologies within the config manager world, so we see the introduction of the rather fun to play with cloud management gateways, the cloud distribution points. That gives us some of our initial connection points regardless of the type of device, so we can take now pure AAD joins, so the the Azure Active Directory joined devices, or the Windows Server AD, so the traditional ones on premise, or work groups. We don't really mind or matters. What we do is a lot of secure connections using certificates, using Azure AD authentication, either for the individual the devices themselves or the actual users on the devices to both the systems that we're managing and also the consoles that we use for managing and maintaining this. So there's a lot of back-end raw core infrastructure and stuff involved as well, with a lot of security and best practice recommendations, automation, management wrapped around this. Managing systems like this at scale means that a lot of this cannot be done with manual interference, hands-on, just tweaking and tuning. So we've got a lot of systems that we've developed that handle a lot of that for us to make it as efficient and as workable as possible at scale. We also had some challenges that we wanted to crack around the traditional way of doing OS imaging, which while that's starting to phase out, we're seeing more around the customization of devices rather than the actual raw imaging of devices. We didn't want to leave that behind, so we did some magic around providing the Pixie capability services from the cloud-based service with some very good friends of ours. And that is now becoming a reality where we can actually image devices across the internet. There's other sort of bits and pieces that we do there around not just the protection side, but the load balancing and also the bandwidth management. We're conscious that as soon as you start to use the internet and you're dragging stuff across your WAN and into your environment, we have to mitigate as much of the impact of experience as possible. We still want users to be able to get to their cat videos at lunchtime, still be able to stream on YouTube, still access normal services like Office 365 that are already consuming a lot of your internet bandwidth. So we do a lot of work around making sure that we minimize the actual downloads from the internet using as much of the peer-to-peer technologies, branch cache, peer cache, and some extra flavors that we add in there around the management to make it as efficient as possible. And as we see more investment from Microsoft around things like delivery optimization, we'll also be making the investments in there to make sure it works as efficiently as possible. So just to kind of wrap that up, I mentioned all of our connections are secure. So they're made over SSL, we're utilizing certificates, we'll utilize Azure Active Directory wherever possible for user authentication. So we get all the benefits that come around that with the awareness of user identities. We can keep and monitor, make sure there's no breaches, no sort of unusual activity going on with accounts. I mentioned making sure that the content distribution, that while it is hosted within Azure and it's downloaded to your sites, we make sure that it's efficient as possible when it does enter your network to save that WAN usage. Best of all, there is no hard requirement because of this for on-premise infrastructure. We don't need you to put multiple distribution points all over the place. You don't need to have big SQL servers that are running your databases. All of that lot is on us at PowerON. We maintain it, we run it, we make sure it's supported, upgraded, secured, maintained, which is at the end of the day one less thing for you to worry about. And you're also drawing on our years of experience of doing this for customers, but now doing this for everyone, but en masse centralized without that variation that goes around different environments. So the last thing for me to mention just before we wrap this up and hand back to Chris is around the fact that we have the two consoles that we use for access. You'll have seen in my demo I briefly had up a web-based console. So we're simplifying the usage for what we call the daily driver. So that normal operations tasks that we'll see either third line analysts that just want to quickly get in and get something done, or help desk analysts that maybe don't want to know the complexities or be bogged down with the old style console and just want to quickly get on and use it. So it's fast, lightweight, can be used anywhere and performs various tasks around device management, software management, and user management. And then we also have that full rich admin console. We talk about this for the granular control. When you want to go in and set some specific compliance policy settings, for example, with registry keys and values, or you want to create a complicated task sequence to do a specific job for that need and time. So I'm going to hand back to Chris now, and he'll take you through the remainder of the webinar and summarize up with next steps, etc. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Steve, for that. So hopefully that's given you a bit more of a detail from a technical perspective of what's involved in the Pulse platform. And really what I just wanted to do is just summarize a couple of key points in terms of the capabilities that Pulse can help you within your organization or to supporting your customers with. So really we're looking, the key highlight here is internet-based management. So we're able to manage, secure and patch devices, deploy software through to them, all from the internet. And really that breaks down a lot of the cost and complexity that organizations have around not only the infrastructure that's on premise, but the ongoing management requirements of that, especially with the configuration manager increased cadence of those releases that I mentioned before. It's a fantastic platform for really simplifying Windows 10 servicing. So being able to build in a platform that you can use to create repeatable processes on top of your existing processes for how you look to upgrade to the next versions and later releases of Windows 10, as well as your application packaging and remediation elements, and looking at integration into Windows Analytics to kind of look at the fit for purpose of the next release and what elements you may need to look at to make that upgrade happen. and equally enhancing desktop security. So the ability for us to encrypt, use BitLocker, all of the enterprise class Microsoft security applications with Windows Defender and ATP, and enabling your organizations, if relevant, to take advantage of those services as well, is a key part of Pulse. One thing that we are mindful of is that Pulse isn't fit for purpose for everyone. There absolutely is requirements sometimes for some organizations to have configuration manager on premise, and equally some organizations would easily be able to use the Microsoft Intune and cloud management technologies that I mentioned at the very start as an alternative for them to manage their device estate as well. So if we move on to what Pulse is in terms of the subscription options, there's two options. So we have a normal subscription option, and we also have the ability for you to have your own dedicated tenancy. So what that means is you can have your own tenancy. This is typically used for our managed service partner providers, so they're able to onboard their clients to their own tenancy. But equally, if you're an organization that has multiple child sites or multiple companies as part of that, you can have a central tenancy that you can use to manage the device and desktop estates across those different organizations. The dedicated tenancy also allows you to get cost efficiencies around application packaging, so you can deploy those packaged applications across those different sites that you have, as well as simplify your image management and make any tweaks and changes that you want to those imaging and policy-based services across that estate. But it gives you a fantastic central component or pane of glass, if you will, to manage across all of those different business units as well. Pulse is an annual subscription, so it's very flexible. We can true up and true down depending on your device count, and those options we can explore further if you have any specific questions around them as well. So one of the key things I just want to touch on here at the end is we do have the ability for you, if you're interested, to have a personalized demo. If there's anything from today's session that piqued your interest and you want to have more of a tailored conversation to your needs, please get in touch with us at hello@poweronpulse.com or visit our website at www.poweronpulse.com. We also have free trials available as well, so feel free to get in touch via the website, request that, or email us, and we'll be in touch as well to support your needs. So with that, I just want to thank you. Thanks for your time. I appreciate there was a lot of information that we shared there. Please feel free, like I said, to reach out and have a look at these resources if required. And then what we might do now is have a look at the questions and take any questions through the chat function if you feel free to put them in now. Thanks.